Great, thank you very much. Then I will call to order this June 16th, 2022 meeting of the Board of Directors of the Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency. Would the clerk please call the roll and then read your statement?
Thank you. Director Conant, Director Avdes,
Here.
Director Reeder,
Here.
Director Holloway,
Present.
Director Shaw, Director Ashby, Director Harris,
Here.
Director Jennings,
Here.
thank you. Director Desmond, Director Hedges,
Here.
Chairman Kennedy,
Here.
Director Natoli, Director Cerner, Director Nava.
Here.
We have an 8-member quorum. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This meeting of SAFCA is being recorded and will be aired on Metro Cable Channel 14 on Saturday, June 18th at 2 p.m. The meetings will also be available on SAFCA's website within 48 hours after the meeting at www.safca.org. As a courtesy meant to members of the public, when you're not speaking, please leave your microphones on mute. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. And Madam Clerk, do we have public comment?
I have not received any public comments. Chairman Kennedy?
Thank you. Is there anybody on the line that a member of the public who has comment to make? Then let's move to consent.
And our first consent items 1 through 15 are in order.
This is Brian Holloway. I'll move the consent calendar.
Harris will second.
Okay, is there any member of the board who would like to pull anything from consent or have questions with an item that's on consent? Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment on consent?
I have not received any.
Is there anyone on the line that has any comment on consent matters? Please call the roll.
Thank you. Director Conant? Director Avdes?
Aye.
Director Reeder?
Aye.
Director Holloway? Director Holloway?
Aye.
Thank you. Director Shaw? Director Ashby? Chairman Harris, Vice Chairman Harris?
Aye.
Director Jennings?
Yes.
Director Desmond? Director Hedges?
Aye.
Chairman Kennedy?
Aye.
Director Natoli? And Director Nava?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes with 8-member approval.
Next item, please.
The next item is a public hearing, separate matters, item number 16, resolution number 2022-074, adopting the recommended fiscal year 2022-23 budget.
Mr. Campbell?
Thank you, Chairman Kennedy. Jason Campbell, Deputy Executive Director. I would like to kind of recap a little bit of what we have done to get to this recommended budget. Again, on May 3rd, the Finance Subcommittee reviewed staff's presentation of a proposed budget and provided feedback that was positive and no real changes in the budget at that time. On May 19th last month, I presented the board the preliminary budget, and here today we are now bringing forward the proposed and recommended public hearing for the fiscal year 22-23 budget. Next slide, please. So as we roll into our overall budget, and we talk about all funds associated with the budget package that your board has received with all the attachments and exhibits to meet the public code and government code for budgeting for our agency. We are recommending that we move forward with $143.3 million in appropriations for funding, both sources and expenditures. And what makes up that $143.3 million are the projected fund balances for the current fiscal year of $59.8 million, revenues that are projected at $67.2 million, and a reserve release from existing reserves of $16.3 million. So again, total sources of 143.4 roughly. And if we can go to the next slide, please. And the offsetting appropriations for expenses in all funds of $143.4 million is made up of a number of activities and construction efforts that we have expenses going forward. So for fiscal year 22-23, our projected cost for projects and acquisitions is $129.1 million, which is a pretty significant amount for SAFCA in any year. As you can see, other components of our recommended appropriations include some provisions for reserves at the end of the fiscal year, but also our salaries and benefits of $3.6 million, services and supplies in all of the funds of about $12.8 million, some contingencies just in case we need appropriation movement for the fiscal year based on surprising things that may occur in a fiscal year, such as inflation, but also other activities that may not be known to us today. And then, of course, we do have some transfers between funds that will help us with cash flow, but also make things work for each of the individual funds and the budget that's proposed. Next slide, please. So again, just a quick reminder, SAFCA is primarily funded and sourced through 4 operating funds. The Operations and Maintenance Assessment District 325A is considered our general fund. We have a Development Impact Fee Fund that provides support for our capital programs to get to 500-year level of flood protection. We also have 2 assessment districts that are benefit assessment districts, the Natomas Basin Local Assessment District, as well as the Consolidated Capital Assessment District number 2. Next slide, please. So going through the funds very quickly and the overall components of the appropriations request and the recommended budget. The $9.1 million in the O&M fund is, again, made up of components such as salaries and benefits of $3.6 million, services and supplies of $6.6 million, which include a number of cost components, including our general liability insurance, the lease for our space, as well as consultants and other components of our activities to deliver our programs. And then, of course, we have some inter-fund cost recovery that occurs for staff time associated with project expenses from the other funds. And then this $9.1 million in expenses is offset by financing or revenues coming from different sources, such as prior year fund balance of $1.2 million, a reserve release from existing reserves of $1.4 million, and primarily also from our special assessments coming into this fund of $6.4 million. Next slide, please. Moving into the Development Impact Fee Fund. This fund is also supporting infrastructure components and project components across the board for improving flood improvements for the Sacramento area. Of course, our infrastructure is the primary use of funding in the DIF. $10.8 million of infrastructure work is anticipated in the coming fiscal year. We have interfund transfer of $5.6 million supporting other programs within the infrastructure and project efforts. And we have provisions for reserve at the end of this fiscal year, or proposed fiscal year, that we anticipate to be in the $9.6 million range, for a total appropriations of $27.7 million for fiscal year 22-23. On the financing side, we're seeing a prior year fund balance of $16.6 million. Much of that is project work that has not necessarily been completed yet, that will roll into the next fiscal year. And then we have state grants or reimbursements of $4.6 million, along with the revenues anticipated to be around $6.4 million. Next slide, please. The Natomas Basin Local Assessment District, we are continuing to support the Natomas program and also using using funds from Natomas Basin Local Assessment District to support the activities that are currently appropriated in the CC82 fund. So you see that interfund transfer of $15 million going into CC82 for the existing programs that are funded and appropriated. We also have a provision for reserve in this fund, anticipating that at the end of the fiscal year, we will have $5.3 million set aside for the coming fiscal years. $20.3 million in overall expenditures being offset by financing from operating transfers in from fiscal accounts, some prior year fund balance of $16.6 million, a little bit of interest income, and some special assessment that is remaining following debt service. Next slide, please. And as we roll into the Consolidated Capital Assessment District number 2, CC82 is where the lion's share of expenditures occur. As we discuss frequently, the infrastructure program and land acquisition program that we have to meet the Corps' requirements for projects, as well as other activities that are in our portfolio of projects and efforts. Again, $86.1 million in overall expenditures identified here, and that is offset also by some interfund transfers that are coming in at $20.6 million. Looking a little further down, the financing on the CC82 is covered by a number of things, and that includes operating transfers in from other funds of $24.3 million from finance related accounts, prior year fund balance of $25.2 million, a reserve release from existing reserves of $14.9 million, and state reimbursements are anticipated for next year to be $21.4 million. Overall, again, $86.1 million in expenditures and sources. Next slide, please. So as we talked about the number of expenditures and we see the different efforts that are going on for our flood control portfolio of projects, you can see that 91% of the work that's being done is associated to very large projects, the American River Common Features 2016 with $67.3 million moving forward, and then the American River Common Features Natomas, $31.2 million. We do still have a number of activities taking place up at the Folsom Lake and Folsom Dam with temperature control shutters, the joint federal project, and the Folsom Raise itself, continuing to move forward and towards completion. We do have a number of efforts taking place that are funded from the development impact fee, but we have the Elkhorn Basin, the Levels project support, and a few other components that are making up about 2% of the overall spend in projects. Then, of course, we have the Sac River GRR, or what we also refer to as the YELLOW effort, where we're trying to work on the Yellow bypass and also upstream reservoirs to advance the dialogue and the effort to get to 500-year level of flood protection. And then we are continuing to work with the Corps and our non-federal sponsors at the state to make sure that we get these other projects closed out, South Sac Streams, Ward 9699, and a few other components will continue in the coming fiscal year. So with that, we're going to further break down the project components real quick on the next slide. And again, this is a reconstitution of the different expenses that are occurring in our capital programs as well as other related projects. You can see which fund is funding each one of these efforts. Again, about $500,000 going forward in the O&M fund towards project efforts as identified here. We can see the development impact fee, a number of activities primarily in the Elkhorn Basin and at the American River Common Features for the Sacramento Weir expansion and levees at the Elkhorn Basin. And then, of course, in the CC82, you can see the $96.8 million worth of efforts, primarily in the two programs of American River Common Features 2016 and the Natomas project. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and go to the next slide. And staff would like to recommend that the board adopt resolution number 2022 074 for the fiscal year 22-23 recommended budget as detailed in the exhibits A through D of the resolution, and authorizing Safeco to proceed with its flood protection mission. Mr. Chair, I'm available to answer any questions, and I believe we have instructions for the next step.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Campbell. Before we go to public hearing, is there any questions from the board? All right, with that, I will open up the public hearing. At this time, is there any member of the public that would like to address the item before us, which is the budget 22-23? Okay, hearing none, I will close the public hearing. And is there a motion?
I'll move to open and close the public hearing and pass the budget.
Second.
And was the second Jennings?
Desmond?
Desmond, okay. So moved by Harris, second by Desmond. Please, roll call.
Thank you, Director Conant. Director Abdus,
Aye.
Director Reader,
Aye.
Director Holloway. Director Holloway? Nod.
Aye.
Thank you. Director Shaw? Director Ashby? Vice Chairman Harris?
Aye.
Director Jennings? Thank you. Thumbs up. Director Desmond?
Aye.
Director Hedges?
Aye.
Chairman Kennedy?
Aye.
Director Natoli?
Aye.
Thank you. And Director Nava?
Aye.
Motion passes with 10-member approval.
Thank you, and well done, Mr. Campbell and staff. You take a very complicated budget and put it into a framework that even I can understand. I appreciate that. Next item, please.
Item number 17 is the Executive Director's Report.
Right. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Kennedy. Rick Johnson, Executive Director. Wanted to hit a few things. First, starting out with the federal fiscal year 2023 appropriations. The federal fiscal year, just as a reminder, starts October 1st of 2022. The House Energy and Water Subcommittee has scheduled to start working on their they call it a markup, where any addendums and amendments start June 21st with the flood control on the 28th. And the House leadership has called for a floor vote on all appropriation bills in July. So that's encouraging. The Senate still hasn't announced a schedule yet. So Linda, if you go to the next slide. So just a reminder why this is important to us. The president's proposed budget for FY23 had a new study start for the Yellow Bypass, including $500,000 in funding, and then also had almost $173 million in funding for continued construction in Natoma. So we're anxious to see the federal 23 appropriation bills get passed. Lindy, if you go to the next slide. So just changing gears a little bit, just a reminder that the Folsom Dam Raise authorization also included an ecosystem component, which was modifying the existing temperature shutters to modernize them out at Folsom to help the fish species downstream with the cold water temperature management. So Lindy, if you go to the next slide. So both the House and Senate again this year are doing basically they're a scaled down version of the old earmarks. In the Senate, they call them congressionally directed spending. On the House, they call it community project funding. So Safeco requested that for the FY23 funding that our members consider including in their request $45 million for the construction of the temperature shutters. That's the federal share. The designs are underway and are expected to be done in FY23 to start the process to advertised for construction. So that's why we're seeking them in this year. So Lindy, if you go to the next slide. So the members have part of the process now, they're trying to make it a little more transparent, is once they submit their requests, they have to post them publicly. So to date, two of our congressional members have posted their requests that included funding for the temperature shutters. So like to thank Senator Padilla, who did include in his congressionally directed spending request $45 million for the temperature shutter, and thank Congresswoman Matsui, who in her community project funding request did also include 45 million. So I'd like to thank both of them very much. Lindy, if you could go to the next slide. So then on the authorization side, things are moving forward with the Water Resources Development Act for 22. We have a request in that the 2016 project, which is currently June of 2024, be extended. So on the Senate side, their draft water bill just eliminated the date altogether. The House draft extended it through December of 2026. So Lindy, if you go to the next slide. So on June 8th, the House actually passed their version of the Water Resources Development Act. Our item ended up in there as section 343B, and they left in there the extension through December of 2026. So Lindy, if you go to the next slide. So the next steps now are for the Senate to vote on their version. They'll undoubtedly be different, and they'll hold a conference committee to work out the difference between the two. Once the agreed upon final version is done, it'll have to go back to both the House and Senate to be passed again. At that point, the president would sign the bill into law. I think they're all motivated to get a bill done this year. So we're hopeful that it gets done, that there'll be some type of extension of that authority for us. So Lindy, if you go to the next slide. So I did want to bring to you a potential issue that we're working on here, make you aware in case it becomes more of a problem in the future. But as part of the American River Common Features 2016 project, the Sacramento Weir widening, we're in the process of trying to get all the relocations out of the way so that the Corps can go ahead and advertise construction for the weir later this year. So if you go to the next slide, Lindy, just a reminder, what we're doing as part of the project is we're basically adding a new weir and widening the bypass adjacent to the existing one. And then the state, as part of their Lower Elkhorn Basin levee setback, is setting back the Sacramento Weir levee on the north and the east side of the Yolo bypass up to where Interstate 5 comes across. Go to the next slide, Lindy. So right now, the site condition that we have, the existing weir, and then the railroad runs across existing weir and then extends on an embankment north of there, and then the Lower Elkhorn Basin levee setback will build a temporary levee that ties in just on the other side of the existing weir. If you go to the next slide, Lindy. So on this one, what the construction features will be is to build a new weir. You can see it there kind of highlighted in the red. And then we would, once the weir's done, we'd remove the old levee, which it would serve as a cofferdam while the weir is being built. We'd also need to remove the railroad embankment and then the temporary levee that the state built as part of levels, and then part of the weir would be to widen, to connect that levee on the north side. So if you go to the next slide, Lindy. So this next slide kind of shows what our problem is right now. There's several fiber optic companies that have lines that run in the old railroad embankment. So the green arrow shows the current alignment of those fiber optic lines in the railroad embankment. The orange arrow shows where we would move them temporarily. And then the blue arrow shows where the new weir alignment is. And you can see that that the existing alignment is just in the way in several places in construction. So if you go to the next slide, Lindy. So what we're just basically what happened is even though Safeco purchased the road, there's still an easement there in Pacific that allows them to have an easement for lines such as a fiber optic, and then the fiber optic utilities are there through a license agreement. So we need to relocate that easement and the utilities to make way for the project. So if you go to the next slide, Lindy. So we're struggling a little bit. We're working with the fiber optic companies. It's not moving along quite as fast as we're hoping. Item 12 on consent, which you passed today, does give us some additional authorities, which should help us to move some of the agreements along. We're shooting to have reach agreement with them by the end of June, so that we can meet our real estate certification deadline of September 1st. What that deadline is we certify to the core that we have all the agreements and real estate in place to relocate everything, and they can go ahead and start advertising for construction. We're still moving forward with it, but because it is getting a little tight, we do have the potential for a delay, and a delay, a very significant delay, could cost us a full construction season, and under the current cost inflation, that could run 20 to 30 million. So we're still hopeful. We're still working with them, but I did want to make you aware of this in case we need to come back for some additional help here in the near future. Lindy, if you go to the next slide, and then changing subjects here, I did want to introduce you. We have a new member on our team. Letitia Morris has joined us as our associate planner, and we'd like to welcome her to the staff. I wish these were in person, made her a little easier, but Letitia actually used to work for Safe as an intern a few years ago. So it's her, I guess we didn't scare her off the first time, so she decided to come back and join us again. So anyway, just want to welcome her. And with that, that's all I had, and I'll take any questions.
Okay, welcome, Letitia. Are there any questions of the board? Right. Well then, with that, our next meeting is, I'm sorry, is there any member of the board, and oh, look at that. Any member of the board that
Happy
has
birthday, Brian.
any member have any comments on the executive director's report? Okay. Is there any member of the board that has any comments on Director Holloway's birthday?
Yes,
Happy birthday, Brian.
I'd be happy to take you out for a beer, Brian.
Now we're talking. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Brian. All
Thank
right,
you.
next meeting is July 21st. And with that, if there's no other questions,
Whoa, wait, I do have a comment.
okay.
So I recently went to the Shasta Dam on a tour with Aqua, and one of my board members on the Sites Reservoir made a presentation about sites. The reason that it actually has a relevance to Safeco is because if Sites Reservoir gets built, the management of the Folsom Reservoir can work much more collaboratively for temperature control on our rivers and give us some flood benefits. So it's a really fascinating tour. If you haven't been to Shasta Dam, I highly recommend it. They give public tours regularly. It's really big. It's 610 feet tall. You go down 43 stories in an elevator and tour the dam from within and without. Anyway, I just wanted to share that with the board, and also a quick plug for Pops in the Park. If you really want to have a wonderful evening on Saturday, this Saturday, June 18th, come to McKinley Park at 6 o'clock for a free concert, and it's going to be a great show.
Thank you, Director Harris or Vice Chair Harris. Any other comments before we adjourn? Hearing none, thank you, everybody. We are adjourned.